Have you ever had that moment? You're standing at your mailbox, or maybe you're scrolling through your bank app on a Sunday evening, and for a second, everything is quiet. You see the number, it's fine, it's okay. You're meeting your obligations, but then it hits you, a quiet, persistent whisper. How is it that they're ahead? You know who I mean. Your neighbor, your college roommate, the person who, as far as you can tell, earns almost exactly what you earn, the same industry, maybe a similar title, and yet their life seems to have this different texture. A newer car that didn't seem to cause a financial tremor, a renovation that just happened, a certain ease when the dinner bill comes. It's not ostentatious wealth. It's a subtle, puzzling gap in outcomes. And that whisper in your head forms a question. What do they know that I do? Is it a secret stock? A side hustle they're not telling me about? Did they get some inheritance I never heard about? I'm Sadar, and I've spent, well, probably too much time thinking about these quiet, unsettling moments where our financial reality bumps up against someone else's, and our brain immediately starts writing a story to explain the gap. We almost always write a story about inputs. They must have a secret, a trick, a better input. Rarely do we write the true story, which is almost always about the invisible machinery in between the input and the outcome. Today, we're not talking about the billionaire and the barista. That gap is obvious and its causes are vast. We're talking about the far more intimate and in many ways more psychologically vexing puzzle, the same apparent income but a different financial life. This is the territory of quiet divergences, and understanding it has less to do with spreadsheets, though we'll get to those, and almost everything to do with psychology, with the stories we tell ourselves about what money is for. By the end of this, I'm not going to give you 5 hacks to outturn your neighbor. Instead, I want to offer you a new map, a way to see the invisible valleys and mountains between two identical salaries, and in doing so, maybe quiet that whisper, not with envy or defeat, but with profound clarity. Let's call our two people Alex and Sam. Same age, same starting salary out of college, $75,000. They even get similar raises over the years. On a gross income chart, their lines are virtually on top of each other. This is the same income part of our title. It's what we see from the outside. It's the story we tell. But money isn't about the lines on that chart. Money is about what happens in the dark, in the thousands of unseen decisions made at kitchen tables, on online shopping carts, in the silent defaults of our bank accounts. The first and most seductive illusion we need to dismantle is the illusion of the visible. We see Sam's new patio. We don't see Alex's maxed out Roth IRA from age 22. We see Alex's fancy vacation photos. We don't see Sam's 15-year-old Corolla, paid for in cash, quietly sitting in the driveway. We are comparing our own behind the scenes, with all its anxieties, its compromises, its private stresses to someone else's highlight reel. Our brain, desperate for a simple narrative, assumes the highlight reel is evidence of a healthier whole financial picture. But very often, it's evidence of a completely different set of priorities. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, a friend of mine bought a beautiful vintage sports car. It was stunning, and I felt that pang. That how is he doing this pang? We made similar money. I wrestled with it for weeks, almost resenting him for this symbol of ease I didn't have. Then one afternoon, he mentioned offhandedly, almost proudly, that he hadn't contributed to his 401k that year to cash flow the repairs. My entire perspective flipped. I wasn't seeing his wealth. I was seeing his allocation. He had allocated for conspicuous joy. I had been allocating for invisible security. Neither is morally superior, but they create wildly different outcomes over time. This is our first crucial insight. Outcomes diverge not at the moment of earning, but at the moment of allocating. And allocation is a story you tell yourself about what matters most. Is it freedom, status, security, experience? Your neighbor isn't richer because of a secret. They are living a different financial story. But a story needs a mechanism, a way to turn belief into reality. That brings us to the most powerful and most mentally difficult force in personal finance: Let's go back to Alex and Sam. They both get their first paycheck. The money hits their checking account. For Alex, this is the moment of action. The money is available. It is fuel for his life right now. Bills, fun, savings if there's some left. For Sam, the paycheck is almost an afterthought because Sam has already fought the battle. Sam's battle happened on a boring Tuesday afternoon when she set up direct deposits. A portion of her paycheck, let's say 15%, never touches her checking account. It is instantly diverted to a retirement account, a savings bucket, an investment platform. It is invisible. For Alex, saving is an active monthly decision, a test of willpower against a world designed to separate him from his money. For Sam, saving is passive. It's the default. Spending is what requires action. This is not a difference in discipline. This is a difference in system design. Our brains are terrible at making good decisions in the moment, surrounded by frictionless, by now buttons and the emotional weight of daily life. We are phenomenal at setting up a one-time system that runs on autopilot. The person who is richer on the same income has almost always lost the faith that they will do the right thing later. They have accepted their future self as a stranger who will be tired, weak, and seduced by a shiny object. So they build a moat around that stranger's castle today. This connects to a deeper psychological truth. We overestimate our power in the moment and underestimate the power of a process over time. Think of it like this. You stand at the edge of a forest. Alex looks at the dense trees and says, "I'll just walk straight, I'll course correct as I go." Sam looks at the same forest and before taking a single step pulls out a compass, sets a bearing and commits to checking it every 10 minutes. 5 years later, they are in completely different clearings. Alex's path was dictated by the thickest brush, the prettiest flowers, the easiest downhill slopes. Sam's was dictated by a fixed point on the horizon she chose when she was thinking clearly. The financial equivalent of that compass is automation. The auto transfer, the target date fund, the set it and forget it contribution. It feels boring, unheroic. It lacks the drama of picking a winning stock, but drama is the enemy of wealth building. Wealth is built in the silent, unattended default processes. So we have two divergences now, the story of allocation and the system of defaults. But there's a third, even more subtle force at play. One that feels almost like a personal defect when you're on the wrong side of it. Let me tell you a story about a cliff. Imagine two people start building their homes near the edge of a beautiful seaside cliff. The view is incredible. One person, cautious, builds their house a good 100 yards back. The other, wanting the most breathtaking vista, builds right on the edge. For years, they both enjoy the same view. They seem to be living identical lives. Visitors might even say the person on the edge has a better life. But then, slowly, erosion begins. A little bit of the cliff face crumbles each year, almost imperceptibly. The person 100 yards back doesn't even notice. The person on the edge starts to feel a low, constant anxiety. They have to spend money on surveys, on reinforcements, on insurance. That anxiety starts to color their decisions. They can't relax on a stormy night. A cost that their neighbor never thinks about becomes a central, draining part of their financial life. This is lifestyle creep, not as a moral failing, but as a geological process. It's not about one big, stupid purchase. It's about the series of small, seemingly rational decisions that move your financial house closer to the edge of the cliff. You get a raise. You move to a slightly nicer apartment. The payment is only $300 more a month. Seems fine. But that apartment comes with higher utility costs, a more expensive parking fee, the social pressure to have nicer furniture. You have less margin for error. You are now closer to the cliff. The person with the same income but a richer outcome isn't necessarily living an ascetic life, but they are ferociously protective of their margin, the gap between their income and their core, fixed expenses. They understand that every dollar locked into a fixed monthly obligation is a dollar that loses its flexibility, its ability to compound, its ability to buy peace of mind. When they get a raise, they don't upgrade their lifestyle infrastructure. They upgrade their margin. They channel it into the silent default systems from Act II. Their fixed cost footprint stays relatively stable, so their freedom grows exponentially. Their neighbor with the identical salary might be driving a car with a $700 monthly lease, living in a house that consumes 35% of their take-home, and subscribing to a dozen services they barely use. They have no cliff erosion, but they are standing right on the edge, spending psychic energy and real dollars just to stay in place. From the outside, their life might look more impressive, but on the inside, it is far more fragile. This is why budgets often fail. They focus on cutting back from the edge. The real power is in deciding where to build your house in the first place. We have our map now. 3 invisible landscapes between 2 identical salaries. 1. The story, allocation over earning. 2. The system, defaults over willpower. 3. The structure, margin over lifestyle. But there's one final piece. The piece that ties it all together and explains why this gap feels so personal, so emotional. All financial decisions are, in the end, trades. You are trading money for something. Sometimes it's a tangible thing, a loaf of bread. Sometimes it's an intangible, security, joy, status, time. The person who seems richer on the same income has simply made a different set of trades, prioritized a different currency. Let's make this concrete. Take a $100 dinner out. For Alex, this trades for an evening of fun and connection. The currency he's buying is experience. For Sam, that same $100, if invested for 30 years at a 7% return, could become over $800. The currency she is buying is future freedom. Neither is wrong, but they are in direct conflict. This is the constant, quiet war inside our financial lives, the war between present you and future you. Here's my synthesis, my core belief after all these years of watching this puzzle. Wealth accumulation is not the pursuit of more money. It is the systematic reduction of future regret. The richer neighbor is not a robot who denies all pleasure. They are an architect who has consciously decided which future regrets they can live with and which would be unbearable. They can live with the regret of not having the slightly nicer car. They have decided they cannot live with the regret of being trapped in a job they hate at age 55 because they have no options. So they make trades today to mitigate that specific future regret. Every default system they set up, every time they protect their margin, every allocation they make, it's a peace treaty with a future version of themselves. They are sending resources forward in time to that person. The other neighbor is making a different bet. They are betting that the joy of the upgrade, the thrill of the now, will outweigh the future regret of having less security or less freedom. And sometimes, that's a perfectly valid bet. The tragedy occurs when the trades are made unconsciously, when we arrive at that future filled with a regret we never consciously chose to risk. So the question shifts. It's no longer what's their secret. It becomes, which future regret am I most afraid of, and what trade can I make today to lessen its sting? So let's return to that moment at the mailbox, that whisper. How are they ahead? What if you could replace that whisper with a different set of questions? Not questions of envy, but questions of clarity. What story am I telling with my money? What story do I want to tell? Where have I placed my house? Am I constantly reinforcing the edge of the cliff, or am I enjoying the view from a place of inherent safety? What is my one-time system? Where have I replaced willpower with automation? What is the future regret I am most dedicated to avoiding? Your neighbor isn't richer because of a secret input. They are living inside a different financial narrative, powered by different systems, trading for a different primary currency. Their salary is the same, but their financial identity is different. My goal for you isn't to mimic their life. It's to become the conscious author of your own, to build your own map based on your own fears, your own values, your own tolerable regrets. Money at its core is just a tool, But the way we use it is the story of our time here. Our anxieties, our hopes, our traded days. The person who understands this, who connects the small daily decisions to the grand arc of their life story, holds a profound kind of power. It's not the power of limitless wealth. It's the power of clarity. The quiet, unshakable knowledge of where you are, why you're here, and what you're building towards. That knowledge, in the end, is the truest form of wealth, and it's available to anyone on any income, starting right now. I'm Sadar. Thank you for thinking about this with me.